So we're here to talk about unleashing unpredictability. So this is a marketer's guide as how we've built it to behavioral science, data, AI. Can you just tell us a little bit first about yourself, your role, just a real quick introduction about what you do and how you get into behavioral science? Because that's, I guess, not something most people land themselves in early in their career.
Yeah, completely. I think obviously we've seen a lot of shifting trends. We're going to talk about them. And basically, because there were so many shifting trends during COVID and the fact that obviously the brands weren't understanding their consumers anymore, we got to a point where we actually saw a rise in the need to really understand what drives people. So essentially taking a step back, looking at, I guess, 8 years ago, from an academic background, studying the science of marketing and what drives people, actually enabled me to spot some sense of opportunity to actually do that within advertising, because a lot of people use behavioral science as a way to actually get, things happen in terms of organizational psychology in corporations, or in terms of, for example, interventions in the government, for example, but not really in advertising. So when I joined my first advertising agency, I basically had a strategy role where I spotted an opportunity to develop consumer insights into that. And essentially, we saw a lot of traction around it, opportunities to grow brands like Johnson & Johnson or PepsiCo or Visa, for example, especially in financial services. We literally saw clients asking for it because it really works. So that was why. And basically, when I came to London, funnily enough, I don't know how the world works, I got approached by a behavioral planning agency in terms of a behavioral media planning agency. And we actually, again, saw clients wanting to buy beyond the media buying. They wanted to actually buy the research to really understand what drives people, understanding their audiences, the perception around the brand, but also the biases, things like social norms, loss aversion, the power of free, the power of now, and then merging that with the science and technology behind marketing, and we'll talk about AI and data science. So again, it was a shift. So I guess the world shifted and I shifted with it, which meant that just spotting an opportunity to use psychology with technology, with marketing was quite important, because after COVID, we saw that a lot of clients wanted to invest more in it because it proved that your consumers are not Spock. Your consumers are not rational. Habits change, things change. Across all industries, almost our clients are range between FMCG, entertainment, finance, tech. So it's quite major. So yeah, it was a shifting. I guess I just went with the flow, but also work throughout, obviously.
Obviously, most people here in the audience as well probably won't be. I don't know who's applying behavioral science to their roles at the moment.
I've got a job to do.
There's a couple. There's a couple.
Oh, okay.
What about Jake Mayo?
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we kind of basically, we're trying to encourage a kind of changing habit, and also kind of planners in the industry to embrace the often forgotten channel of mail, and we've taken a very behavioural approach to that from day one.
Also, could you just explain to me very simply, because I don't really understand what's going on most of the time, but what at its core, in less than 60 seconds, what is behavioral science?
So I'm going to give you one example, and I hope it's going to create an aha moment with everyone. But essentially, take Ozzy Osbourne and King Charles, right? Basically, they're the same age, they've got the same wealth, they've got the similar interests, they're married, right? They're part of the same mosaic group, right? They've got the same demographics, but you can't talk to them the same way. You can't communicate to them the same way. Behaviorally, they're very different. Their psychographics are very different. Again, behavioral science tells you that you need to go beyond demographics. You need to look at psychology. You need to look at psychographics. Because if you keep going, per very, very broad factors, you won't really be able to resonate with them and mirror their behavior and their needs at the core. So essentially, behavioral science is the study of how we behave in society, how we actually take part in this world. And another example is, for example, with one of our food clients, they sell microwave burgers. Essentially, we saw that during COVID, people were actually buying more burgers during lunch, right? Because the shame factor wasn't there. You could microwave your burger, eat it. When we went back to the office, this stopped because of the shame factor. So we're humans, we're driven by ego. We're driven by factors that actually make us very irrational meaning that people and brands need to know that, again, their consumers are not Spock, their consumers are not, if you know Spock, obviously, if their consumers are not rational. We're driven by really, I say we because I'm a human consumer, like we're driven by emotional factors that sit at the core of behavior. That's why we're going to talk about the fact that implicit behavior, understanding unclaimed behavior beyond what people say, because claimed behavior is not entirely accurate at all. So how do you understand the nuances that go beyond claimed behavior to understand what shapes people, their emotions, their real perception, the way they communicate to the world, the way they engage with brands beyond rational factors, or even just surveys. You can go beyond surveys, especially with all the data that we have out there in this world at the moment.
So it's about that common example I think most people in the room will know about, or you see the pricing difference, for example. So £9.99 versus...
Exactly. Everything we do, you're going to be surprised. I'm not going to open that kind of forms now, but everything, all the interactions, everything we do is anchored in behavioral science. We're humans, but behavioral science is the study of gaining more predictability over that unpredictability. Because you know that we're driven by social norms, right? If someone goes and screams, hey, there's there's a bunch of like cookies out there, like you want to go and eat them. If someone comes back in and says, oh, those are the best cookies in the world, you're going to want to try them. If, for example, there's some sort of phenomenon where you've got the power of free, the power of now, and factors like that, it means that you're actually able to engage a bit more with brands. But again, it differs per industry as well. But again, we're very irrational creatures, so it's really about understanding the science behind human behavior, but also in marketing and brands, how you could use that as a brand to be able to connect with your consumers and add more value instead of them, downloading ad blockers again and again.
So it sounds great. It also sounds a bit difficult. Mm-hmm. It sounds potentially a little out of reach to some brands. So how do you get around that problem?
Yeah, so the thing is, it's because we're humans, and there's something called the hard-easy effect, for example, where we think that some things are quite difficult as well, or seem quite difficult, are actually that difficult. Again, at the end of the day, if you focus on it, for example, if you've got a brief, right, where you want to build a brand strategy, the first step there is to say, okay, who's my consumer, right? Who's my consumer? Within that process, this is where you start embedding behavioral science, because you start understanding that beyond demographic factors and broad factors, you've got a range of lifestyle motivations and attitudes and psychological motivations that sit behind your consumers. So if you find that your consumer sits in tribe A, for example, you start, which is who to target, you start in developing an approach to really be able to connect with them by understanding what drives them, their attitudes, the way they engage with media, the way they engage with the world, the way they engage with brand. You could do some ethnography research to dive further into it qualitatively. For example, you could do what we call biometric testing, where you could actually look at facial coding to really understand what drives them beyond what they say. You could, for example, look at all the data we have out there, right? We talk a lot about AI. There's a lot of data out there. And what machine learning and natural language processing enables you to do is to take those millions of data points, billions of data points, and be able to really understand the top themes and frequent themes that are out there in the market and the sentiment that people and specific tribes have when it comes to them. So it's way easier than you think. That's why obviously we exist, and that's why there's not one company at the moment or one agency that doesn't ask us a question about, okay, how can you develop a behavioral unit? Because it's it's not saying it's easy, but it's a subject matter and expertise, a field of expertise in itself, meaning that you've got the behavioral scientists out there that can obviously guide, that can develop that in your business, but also I love doing that. We also develop cheat sheets. Mm-hmm. So cheat sheets to say, hey, you know what, go and apply that yourself. You want to talk to property managers via direct mail for them to be able to engage with you, etc. This is the best way to do it. We develop a cheat sheet, and you can empower that within the business. On Thursday, we've got a session with the leadership team at an immersive experience company, which is amazing because it's embedded in psychology, and it's going to be all about really talking and activating things based off real psychological motivations to go to the event, which is then going to drive more footfall and outcomes, but also feed into service and product development itself. So it's everything from product to experience.
So, it sounds like certainly in the world of events, it'd be helpful. It's, when we were planning this and bringing you all into a room, what a massive behavioural shift compared to a couple of years ago. Although I guess at that point you probably just weren't allowed to go to events, right? How is that consumer behaviour then you're seeing with brands and advertisers changing, cost of living crisis, working from home? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, the rise of behavioral science is massively attributed in the past 3 years to two main factors. COVID, obviously, I mean, we always talk about it, right? Because during that time, brands thought they were actually, again, understanding their consumers, but they weren't. Things changed a lot, habits changed, we started working from home, but at the same time, the post-COVID had a big effect. Because at the moment, for example, just take the world of working, you want to collaborate seamlessly globally across the world, especially in certain industries where it's a bit more mobile and you can travel and work from anywhere, so you want to collaborate seamlessly. But at the same time, there's a need for that cultural relevancy for people and individual needs. So that tension, you can solve it through behavioral science by really building a framework to understand how you can create behavior change. So it's about understanding, for example, how to actually get people and increase their psychological safety, but at the same time enable a seamless global experience. This is a main challenge. You can crack it by understanding human behavior. Now, the second one is AI. I know everyone talks about AI, but as behavioral scientists, AI is great for us because it enables us to create nuances. It enables us to really augment insights. And I talk a lot about it at the webinars and stuff around how you could use emotion AI to really understand, to go beyond what people are saying, to really understand how they actually feel about certain topics. With KFC, for example, when they wanted to launch the vegan options, that was such a bad idea. People want to eat chicken, People want great food. That's the core of KFC. And we spotted that because we took millions of conversations in the UK and saw heavy negative sentiment from those vegan options and a lot of intensity around that, and a lot of positive sentiment and great intensity around millions of conversations and reviews and testimonials around chicken itself and delicious food. With TikTok, the same happened. So we helped them in growing the gaming base across Europe, including Germany, but for them to be able to really ace Gamescom, because we spotted Gamescom as being a great opportunity by using machine learning on their conversations and looking at their affinities, again AI, we actually applied what we call an emotion AI SWOT analysis on Gamescom to understand the strength and the opportunities at Gamescom that they could empower, but more importantly, the threats and the weaknesses. So one of the negative threats at Gamescom that people felt during that event was that they were waiting in lines for so long. There were just painful waiting lines, missing out, all of this. We spotted it through natural language processing, using AI on hundreds of conversations, in this case, with Gamescom, with gamers in Germany. So we told TikTok, your core is, video-based content, short-form videos, getting creators on there, doing things like that. Why don't you create a live streaming pod that people could look at whilst they're in the queue? Again, without really doing this emotion AI analysis on Gamescom and how to win during this event, we wouldn't have spotted this opportunity. So this enabled them to really get people engaged with TikTok. TikTok wasn't as big as today at that time. So again, it's really about understanding how you can connect, and you can't really understand how you can connect by just asking people questions. Because if you ask me something now about what I'm going to eat this afternoon, I have no idea. We're all driven by really emotional and irrational factors. So using psychology, technology, and behavioral science, you can really get a better understanding of what's happening out there.
Sounds like you can start to understand something that, on the surface level may seem like two very similar data points, but the nuances within them.
Completely, exactly. And also, again, the beauty of this is that when you have a lot of text, you don't only understand the content of the text, you can also understand the personalities of people talking. Because you could run that text through, again, natural language processing, IBM Watson, for example, to really understand the personality traits of those people. So another example with a streaming platform, we wanted to get people to adopt a free trial. To do that, we wanted to understand the personality traits of people watching certain shows that they were going to launch. So what we did is we took those people, looked at their personality traits, and then created the content according to that. So with Doctor Who, for example, if we saw that they were really, really low on extroversion, they're very introverted. So we said things like escape to the world of Doctor Who. We changed the uppercase to lowercase. we increase CTRs by literally about 280% because you really match the audience. So it's really about understanding that with a crypto audience, with finance clients, for example, it's a bit bolder, you use words like open up, change, upgrade. So you could really understand things by getting more data, but also making sense of that data in a way that's human first. So this is called like human AI, and it's going to keep booming because with time we can't really ignore the effect of AI. And behavioral science as well is a part of human AI. So COVID and AI had like a major effect on our roles as well here.
Brilliant. And obviously we've got a lot of brands in the audience, a lot of people who market for brands. Could you just tell us a little about a few tips, maybe 3 or 4 things that those people in the audience can go back and use at their desks tomorrow, the little signals that they can understand with the data they've got, perhaps to dip their toes in this world of behavioral science?
Yeah, I think a good starting point would be to understand the biases. So not starting by the technological side, but understanding with the human behavior side. So go, for example, to the Decision Lab. It's a great platform. And you could look at about 200 biases that exist in the world as people around who we are and why we behave the way we behave. So you could start thinking about that and like embedding this in your thinking when you communicate to brands. Because if you see, for example, that you could use things like the framing effect, right? You talked about prices. Or you could use things like social norms or authority bias. It could be quite major. And this is a major thing that you can look at. And again, it differs culture per culture. If you look at, for example, Australian dog owners, in Australia, they're very heavy on authority bias, like looking at experts and vets, because we saw that they were following about 80% of the accounts when they were talking about dogs, they were following a lot of vets. So again, getting their content versus in the UK where you could just walk and buy it. So also understanding the cultural nuances is quite important. So those biases are going to help because if you feel like a market is behaving a certain way, you kind of know to some extent which bias to actually take. So yeah, starting with the behavioral biases. I think the second one is, obviously I know a lot of you hear about ChatGPT, but I was
wondering when we were talking about AI for 15 minutes and ChatGPT hadn't been brought up.
Exactly, because the reason I didn't bring it up is that it's a good it's great. It's going to revolutionize different and also obviously affect some industries, right? Like copywriting, for example. But my opinion is, and I think a lot of people obviously that have worked with AI for a while, is that there's just so much out there that can give you better insights as brand marketers when it comes to AI. So for example, ChatGPT is great to get some information on things and all of that, but you need to look at tools that actually are built on AI that give you more insights than that in terms of brand marketers, like algorithmic eye tracking, for example. Algorithmic eye tracking gives you attention maps, it gives you the cognitive demand on a website, on an app, on a page, things like that, for example. Again, natural language processing on text, machine learning on text, those are really important for us because it augments like the insights. So again, ChatGPT is great in terms of generative AI and to get like information if you want to get information quite quickly. But in terms of marketer, there are so many like different kind of databases that you can access that can give you even richer information on a bespoke project and not just like things on a more like general level. But again, this is why we work with big brands because like they come to us and they're like, okay, can you help us? And not just help us on this project, but also help upskill us in how we could do this like in the future. But beyond ChatGPT, there are a lot. So if you want to learn about them, just like send me a message on LinkedIn or something, or talk to me after. But
Right, we're running out of time, but I just want to see if anybody has a question in the audience at all. We have a behavioural scientist on stage, so it's a pretty good opportunity, right?
Questions, come on.
Sorry, I've asked you right at the end, and it's early in the morning, right, still? I still need another coffee in us. Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Leah, Karam, for joining us on stage. It was great to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.